Apex Legends Season 11 has been out for around a week, and in terms of new seasons, this one is about as solid as they come. Unlike the insane server issues of Season 9 or the player backlash of Season 10, this update came out pretty much flawlessly, and there's certainly a lot to say. The biggest draw is likely the new map, which is an absolutely gorgeous tropical island, and in my opinion, the most aesthetically pleasing Apex has released to date. It's not quite my idea of a dream map, where they just smooshed together every Titanfall map into one perfect amalgamation, but this certainly comes in at a close second. The first thing you'll notice is that Storm Point is unbelievably enormous, coming in at nearly double the size of Kings Canyon, and this size is very much the most contentious part of the entire update. Many players feel as if the much bigger size is leading to far fewer fights, as on average, teams are going to be more spread out, and therefore, less likely to come into conflict, and on a personal level, I'm of two minds. It's true that players seem to be fighting less often on this map. However, I think squads that want to find fights won't necessarily have any more trouble running into them. A lot of this comes down to the movement options available, whether that be comically long zip lines, a single balloon on the highest point of the map, or the new gravity cannons, which although are relatively fixed, are insanely fun to use. I'd even go as far to say that they're as satisfying as performing a leap of faith in Assassin's Creed, because it doesn't matter how many times you use them, getting catapulted across the map never gets old.
That's just such an odd thing.
I wanna ride on this. You piece of shit!
Something the size of the map does however allow is NPC wildlife to be set up around the map, which players can fight in order to improve their own position. This is because mowing down the local fauna will reward players with what the developers are calling smart loot, where they'll drop ammunition and pieces of gear that your squad will personally need, depending on what loadout they're running. Long-time viewers will know how much I loved NPCs in the Titanfall franchise, as the big maps and small player counts made it both a fun way for players to stay engaged between PvP fights and to populate areas which might otherwise feel devoid of life. I'm not certain how popular this might be among the wider community, but as people generally seem to enjoy fighting more than they like looting, I expect I'm probably not alone in saying I'd be happy to have more PvE pockets in other maps. Overall, it's a smart system for rewarding players who are willing to risk giving themselves away, as in return, they know they won't be wasting their time with loot they won't need. Your entire squad will also receive a bunch of crafting material after clearing out a nest, which is even more valuable now that armor crafting has been considerably buffed. As it stands, a player with only 150 materials will be able to go from white armor all the way to purple without ever firing a shot, meaning even if you don't run into another squad until the second half of the game, you're unlikely to be behind if you've used your time wisely. By speedrunning armor crafting last season, my squad was able to get a set of red armor before the 5-minute mark, and I suspect that with enough practice, you could probably get this down to as little as 3 minutes semi-reliably. What I will say is that although the map size, design, and movement options make getting third squadded more manageable, it's also made room for a situation that we fucking joked about before the new update even dropped at all.
No,
fucking next season when they introduce the PvE mobs, team's gonna be like, oh, it's whole squad on me, and there's gonna be fucking 2 spiders.
Lo and fucking behold, the amount of times we were third squadded by fucking prowlers in our limited playtime was fucking comical, and to be entirely honest, I loved every fucking second. These NPCs only attack people who get too close to their nests, meaning much like lava or the ring itself. Once you learn to adapt to and embrace their presence, you can truly use it to your own ends. In one instance, we were even able to escape a particularly thirsty squad by running through a choke point before busting a few nests of spiders on our way out, meaning they either had to fight on you arachnid friends or risk losing a good chunk of health trying to secure an uncertain kill. The only real bad thing I can say about the new map is that when they disabled the ability to emote bounce, they denied players the satisfaction of watching Gibby kickflip down this enormous hill. For a fan base who can never fucking agree on anything, this really was one of the only things that would make everyone happier by existing.
Time to die, motherfucker.
They made such a big mistake. I feel so bad, but it's so funny.
Of course, we can't talk about Season 11 without mentioning Ash, the simulacrum pilot. We absolutely fucking murked in Titanfall 2. In terms of new releases, Ash is probably one of the best the game has had, as her power level seems to be around the middle of the pack, and her actual design is some of the best the game has to offer. Ash seems to be heavily inspired by the Strider class titans from older entries, which is made even better by her robotic titan-like movement. Her first ability is pretty much just a tether trap, which will pin an enemy to a certain position for a few seconds, meaning unless they've got a specific ability to get them out, they'll at the very least be forced to fight you to the death. Although this might sound annoying on paper, I still find this much more manageable on the receiving end when compared to a random scan giving me away or a fucking airstrike dropping on my head. In terms of her ultimate, Ash is equipped with what is essentially a better Wraith portal, which can be cast immediately and allows a player to move their entire team without exposing themselves. The only downsides is its more limited range, its much shorter duration, and the inability to go back the way you came if the other end wasn't as safe as it first seems. Unlike Wraith, players can absolutely use this to engage in a fight, as careful placement can easily position you behind an enemy without ever exposing yourself to gunfire along the way. People have mentioned that much like Seer, this makes Ash particularly good at third squadding fights, and although I wouldn't attempt to refute that point, I'd argue that her ability to get the fuck out whenever she wants makes third squadding harder, as a good team will just jump out of an unfavorable engagement. What abso-fucking-lutely helps with third squadding, however, is her passive, which allows her to use her data knife on death boxes to ping the location of the enemy that killed them. As you might imagine, this means that going on an absolute tear will paint an even bigger target on your back, as every person you kill is just another breadcrumb that leads back to your exact location. In my humble opinion, the most terrifying part of Ash is how many Wraith mains she's likely to convert, because for whatever fucking reason, the worst scum of the earth players of this game seem to have collectively decided that they should pick Wraith, drop away from the team, and immediately speedrun a disconnect. What's particularly frightening is that these players may attempt to infect another character in the roster and increase the number of people who are suddenly compelled to start a Twitch stream. The reason I say this is because I too have a dear friend who was recently infected with early onset ETV. Very sadly, he'll almost exclusively pick Ash, go AFK 500 meters away from inside the next ring, and he'll almost always jump into a fight alone and be the first person to get picked. What he doesn't know is that I've been recording our wins and losses since the start of last season, including exactly why we lost a game, meaning it's my absolute pleasure to present the Playing with Dazed and Amazed experience. Viewers will be happy to know that although the Twitch prefix is still in his name, he's slowly healing with the help of lifeline therapy and an abstinence from being the drop master. We wish this lovable idiot all the best in his recovery.
Allow me to show you what true power looks like.
Perhaps one of my favorite additions to Season 11 was the CAR SMG, which was admittedly up there with the Kraber as one of my favorite weapons from Titanfall 2. Not only can you buy a cheap as fuck black paint job and pretend you actually grinded it to Gen 100, but the weapon is actually pretty damn good. In terms of functionality, it probably sits somewhere between the R99 and the R301, and although its hipfire isn't quite as ridiculous as its appearance in Titanfall, it's still a force to be feared. Its main draw is the ability to use both heavy and light ammo and both heavy and light magazines, meaning it's almost always going to be a good choice because you won't be fighting over resources as much as other similar weapons. The amount of times it's already saved me from running out of ammo with a quick mag swap is already ridiculous, and I'd love to see this kind of flexible weapon design implemented in other guns going forward. Perhaps going against what the developers intended, but I've always been of the opinion that weapon hop-ups should be blank and change their function depending on the gun on which they're attached. This would actually give people a reason to use some of those less coveted hop-ups. It would allow every single weapon to have a special hop-up slot, and it would let players use their favorite weapon attachments at any time, as the developers wouldn't need to rotate them around every season. Wishful thinking for my thoughtful wish list. However, a Christmas present that did actually come early was finally a buff to Wattson, who's traditionally been the test dummy for the nerf hammer since her release. Not only do her fences actually come up fast enough to use them, but she can place them from much further away, and its 3-second stun duration actually makes them somewhat of a deterrent. Her ultimate is now the real star of the show, as not only does it stick around indefinitely, but its slow shield regen has been replaced with a pool of shields, which will heal all players in its radius, at a rate slightly slower than just using shield cells. The shield pool isn't enormous, but it's enough to restore 2 fully depleted red armors, meaning Wattson can essentially convert an ultimate accelerant into 2 batteries. Not a bad deal. However, for whatever fucking reason, her pylon still destroys friendly projectiles, meaning I'm still yet to call her entirely fixed.
You know, it'd be a cool buff for Fuse, because his legs are robo legs. You just have like a constant walk even when you're down, because it doesn't matter because his legs are robo.
You can say that for like half of the cast then.
Well, Pathfinder wouldn't do it because he's polite. And that is my favorite thing, is that like Pathfinder's just like, oh, this caustic gas is really hurting me. Good job, caustic.
Something I have however been disappointed by is that my boy Crypto still hasn't received his long-awaited rework. This is compounded by the fact that the next map doesn't have all that many banners to use his passive ability, which makes me suspect that the developers intend to remove or change this feature sooner rather than later. Judging by previous seasons, I'd probably suspect that his rework will come in the mid-season balance update, along with his heirloom, to scoop up some extra cash. Players who might be saving up for heirlooms might welcome the knowledge that by going to the EA website, you can change your location to Belgium and replace all your future loot boxes with extra crafting materials. No VPN required. Overall, Season 11 will likely be remembered as a particular standout over the life of the game, and when considering the addition of Ash, the CAR SMG, and farmable NPCs, it further confirms my suspicion that they are trying to slowly turn Apex Legends into a title that Titanfall fans will be proud to call part of the family.
Skip it, sky.